then we need to get started.
Let's get started.
Leah, this is Claire's fidget quilt.
Wow.
And we were saying that she had put this ribbon here to be an arrow, so I sewed around it, and I sewed the feathers for the back of the arrow by just sewing up and back, up and back.
I want to make us all laugh. The hat was made from, you know, the red cloth that you clean your glasses with from a glass case?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a pen and I drew the shape of the hat, and I used the cleaning cloth for the eyeglasses, and that's what it's made from.
Wow, it's so colorful, Claire. Very colorful.
Very pretty.
I was looking for something red other than my lips.
And your good heart.
This is
Thank
one
you
that,
so much, Joyce. Missing your
welcome.
crew.
this is one I made for a friend of mine. I'm gonna mail it off to her. Her father has stage 4 Alzheimer's, and I said, well, I'm been making fiddle quilts, so I thought that he would enjoy this one. So this is some prairie points. He likes fishing. He likes sports.
Is this a mouse?
I'm sorry.
Brown thing. Is that a mouse or a teddy bear? The brown.
This is a mouse. There's little mice on this.
Oh,
Yeah.
No, but
And this you untie it and it opens little doors. And this is a pocket. This is a zipper. So it should be fun.
I like the sneakers.
Yeah, it's cute. And then this is my latest baby quilt that I made. A friend of mine had a baby.
wow.
They have 3 girls and now they have a little boy. So it had to be a boy. And it has flannel on the back with dinosaurs.
Oh, you have your own tag back there.
I'm sorry?
You have your own tag made by?
That's right. That's right. I made the tags, you know, and I put the Brookline Bees tag on all of your fidget quilts before they went.
Did the quilt go across the street yet?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they
good.
did. She picked them up about a week ago.
Oh.
So today I thought we'd talk about flying geese, and what inspired this block is the geese fly in formation when they go south for the winter and back north again, and they fly in formation because it gives them more range. But this is the way quilters have interpreted the flying geese, and so it's this block that's twice as long as it is wide. Okay.
It looks like a folded napkin.
Yes, it does. So that's the principle of it. And you can do it with a lot of different scraps. Here you can see this one's pretty scrappy. People make quilts out of this. There's again another scrappy one. And you can either make them very planned or very scrappy. And this is just to give you some idea of the way people put them into a quilt. So here's one string of them. And here, if you look closely in this set of stars, the components are all those flying geese components. So here's a flying goose. Okay, so you have a point, and then this part's called the goose. This is called the goose, and this is called the sky. Okay, but it can be dark on the inside and light sky, or it could be the reverse. There are many different ways to make them here. This is a flying goose component. So
Very
it's often
nice.
seen in stars and different kinds of.
It's very color coordinated, Joyce. I like the colors, the way you blend them in.
Right. And
Very nice.
this is not a flying goose. This is called a half square triangle. So this is a block that's made up of 2 half square triangles. So you take a square and you cut it in half. And you take those 2 triangles and you put them together. So if I took 2 of those triangles that I just made and sew that line. When I open it up, how big is it going to be? So if this is a 3.5-inch square, and this is a 3.5-inch square, and I took 2 of those triangles and put it together, is it going to be 3.5 or what?
No, it'll be like probably 3.
You're
That's
probably gonna lose a 1/2 inch.
Exactly. So you're going to lose that seam allowance, so it will be smaller. So if you want it to come out to 3.5, you have to cut it bigger in the first
4
place.
inches. between.
Okay.
That's
And
very nice.
The other tricky thing about when you're dealing with triangles is that this edge is a bias edge. So where have we heard the word bias before? What do you do with bias?
Bias binding.
Bias binding.
Yeah, bias stretches too.
Exactly. And that's
It
one of so it's a good quality when we're doing bias binding. But when you're trying to make something flat and you're putting these bias edges together, you have to be a little more careful with them because they're stretchy. Okay.
Right.
So just make sure you don't torque it as you sew it.
Well, don't twiddle your fingers.
That means don't pull on it.
That's right. That's right.
Michael, don't twiddle your fingers.
Don't pull. That's
Michael.
all.
Oh, nice.
So this is a Flying Goose unit. This is what we're going to try to make. And typically it is twice as wide as it is high. Okay. And the blue part's called the goose and the red part's called the sky or the background. So
Is that called, excuse me, is that called periwinkle blue?
yeah, it is pretty much periwinkle blue. Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
So this one is 3.5 by 6.5, which is a typical size, but they can be any size. They don't have to be any particular size. And in the old days, it was whatever size you wanted them to be, and you would just make a template. The original templates were made of wood. I'll show you some of those later in the presentation. But now we often use plexiglass because you can see through it. It's really nice. So the finished size is going to be 3 by 6. We're going to cut it to 3.5 by 6.5. Okay.
Is that basting around it? How'd you do that? By hand or the machine?
No, I just drew that so that you could see. This is going to be the finished size. So this overlap at the top gives us our seam allowance.
Wow.
And so we cut it to 3.5 by 6.5, but we're going to lose these seam allowances, and our finished size is going to be that.
So how many of those do you need?
Depends on your pattern.
Oh.
Anywhere from 3 to 60, depending on your pattern.
Mhm.
So constructing a Flying Geese, we're going to take that goose color, the big one, 3.5 by 6.5. Then we're going to take a 3.5-inch square and draw a diagonal line on it. Just draw a diagonal line. And then sew just a hair to the outside edge of it, so toward this point. And the reason for that is when you fold it over, you'll have enough to fold over the sewing line and still cover the entire, this entire field.
Very nice.
So once you fold it back and press it, then you take a second piece of sky and put it on top and draw your diagonal line. And you'll see that they overlap. They overlap just a little bit. And that's to make that seam allowance for us. Okay.
Is this all cotton material?
I'm sorry.
Is the material made of cotton?
Yeah, you normally quilt with material made of cotton, yes.
Mhm.
So again, we're going to sew just a hair to the outside edge of that line and fold it over and press it. And now we have a Flying Geese unit. And this is your seam allowance so that when we make that seam, we're still going to be able to see that point. So that's the critical factor that we're looking for here.
Everything's in a point. Like the corners are considered like a point.
Yes.
So
So these points
just
become
picture in my brain a triangle if I'm going to make something. Just
right.
or an ice cream cone.
So I set out to make some of these, and I had some scraps that were the right width. And so I thought, oh, wouldn't it be cute to have these little children in my blocks?
Oh,
And then
nice.
I realized that if I make a flying goose out of that, I chop the head off that kid.
Oh yeah, poor kid.
And I went, no, that's not really very good. So, all right, second try. We use this one instead. Yeah. All
Well,
right.
anything you do is an experiment, the way I feel.
That's right. And that's why you want to try things out on paper or just by placing things like I did that with the children, placing them and thinking about it and then going, no, I don't think that's a great idea. So this is what I did with the fake squares that I showed you before. I've drawn my line on the fabric. I've sewed just adjacent to that line. And now I'm going to fold it and press it.
Are these
And
all
then-
scraps of materials that you happen to have? Have you bought new stuff? Or
Oh, this is stuff from my stash. And now you can cut this off. This is that seam allowance. And you can cut that part off or not. But if you don't cut it off, you wind up with 3 layers of fabric on that corner. And so I like to cut it off, trim
it
it off.
gets a little heavy.
Yeah, it's a little heavy. All right, so now that we have it pressed, we put the second one on top and draw that same line. We have our overlap here, which is a good thing. And we can turn it and press it.
Wow, beautiful. And
Um,
I like the swirls, like all different patterns like that.
When
Right.
you're ironing, Joyce, do you put water in the steam iron? Or
I
no?
never put water in my iron.
Why?
Reason for that is a lot of irons will spit. They'll spit brown water on your fabric, and then that's a real pain in the neck to get it out. You don't want it to spit on your quilt. So I never put water in my iron. If I need water to help, I use a spray bottle.
Yes.
Oh, that's a good idea.
And you know, at the senior center, we had a spray bottle. It was like the gardening kind. But it's built for a man's hand. And I was at the hairdresser's once and she was misting my hair. And I realized she had a smaller one that was made for a lady's hand. So I bought some misters that are created for hair. And that's a much better size for me to deal with.
Oh yeah, the mini one, yeah.
Yeah,
I have one.
they're smaller and they
You
fit
can get it in the
hand
dollar store for $1.
Exactly. So they're not expensive. And I just use that to mist my fabric if I need it. But usually I don't use water on the fabrics because it'll distort the threads in the fabric. So unless they're really stubborn wrinkles, I don't use it.
This one came with my mushroom kit.
Oh, cute. Cute. That might be a little small for ironing, but yes, anything that will just spritz a little bit of water on it will help you get a stubborn wrinkle out of it. And then once you've got these, you can organize them in different patterns. And I just played with them a little bit to give you an idea of the different things you can do with geese. Here's one where they're going around in a circle. Or here's one that's a star. So if you look just at the blue, so think that this pink is background. So if you look just at the blue, you've got the center of the star and the points of the star like that. Okay. So that's one way to make a star in quilting.
Joyce, excuse me. These all look like they're different square size. This is a different size, and this is smaller than this one. In my eyes,
I think
are they all different sizes?
I think it's an optical illusion because they are all the same size, but the different photographs are probably slightly different dimensions.
Oh,
I
okay.
think the photographs are different. These are the same squares that are in this picture. The exact same ones.
She
I
got
just
it.
rearranged them.
It's probably my eyes.
No, I think it's the size of the picture. So I've distorted the size in that respect.
I
No,
love
because
the,
they're turned sideways. She loses the
the
width.
angle. I lose the angle.
Yeah, the angle is different. So when you put them together, you can see I pinned this from the other side just because it was easier. But then I'm sewing on the side with the point because I want to be sure to cross this very point with my sewing line. And then I will have that nice point in my finished product.
That's very nice.
So they come out like that
Oh.
when you sew them
1, 2,
together.
3, 4, 5, 6.
Very nice.
After you count 6,
Oh,
pick up the sticks.
I have another baby quilt I'm thinking about using some of these in. These are the original kind of wooden templates that would have been made, you know, for Amish quilting. You use your carpentry skills to make a template that then can be used to cut out the fabric. Because don't forget, and you learned this with Patty and Marion, that you would you first draw on the fabric and then cut on those pencil lines to cut out your pieces. Now we have rotary cutters, which are really neat. But in the old days, they had templates that were like this, that were open, and the critical size is on the inside of this. So it's holding down your fabric firmly so that when you draw with your pencil, that you're not moving the fabric. So it's a nice kind of template. Now we use the acrylics that you can see through. And we usually go on the outside edge of the acrylic templates, but these wooden templates you would do on the inside. So what I've shown you is the traditional way to make a flying goose. It's still the most accurate way. You can make any size you want to. The pieces are small, so you have a lot of cutting to do. But the advantage to that is you can use scraps. And that's what they used to do this with scraps, because those corners squares are pretty little, and even the goose part, the rectangle, is fairly small.
Well,
A lot of people.
Economical.
I'm sorry.
They were very economical in those days. They never threw anything away.
That's right. Now, some people don't like this method because it does waste the fabric that you cut off from those corners that we're not going to use. It's a trade-off between you lose a little bit of fabric, but they were scraps anyway, so do you care? It does take time cutting small pieces. You can make yourself some templates to aid cutting or marking, and these, as I showed you, are the old templates. The new ones are made of acrylic, and I'll show you some of those later.
There's a Scottish expression, waste not, want not.
That's right. That's right.
You betcha.
Leah, did you hear that?
Gave you a standing ovation.
Hey, you cut your head off.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So there's another method I wanted to share with you. This is the easiest method for making a flying goose. It's called a one seam flying goose.
And I decided to show everybody. So this is something that I learned from a group of quilters in England several years ago. So I want to show you how to do this.
Great.
Okay? The one seam flying geese block. Now what I've done, of course, you know me and my colorful fabric. I'm actually using two fabrics. I'm using a multicolored hand-dyed fabric that we do here in the studio. I'm also using a dark fabric that's from my new Red Rooster fabrics.
All right.
This is one of the commercial darks. And I have cut a strip from the multicolor fabric that is 3 inches wide. I've also cut 3-inch squares, and you can see a stack of them, 3-inch squares from my sort of multicolored dark fabric. Now, of course, you could use any colors.
Absolutely.
that you like. So
but I
just-
like these.
I'm just using what I like. So the 3-inch squares are easy for you to know. Those are done, and I'm going to take my multicolored fabric, and I'm going to cut. Of course, it's 3 inches wide. I'm going to cut 5.5 inches. So let me just, of course,
3 by 5.5.
3 by 5.5, and I will tell you, I'm a line person sometimes. I like using my ruler on the lines.
No, you're not supposed to do that. You're
I
Ricky
know,
Timms.
I know I'm cutting with the ruler,
Okay.
and I'm measuring, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5. So I'm also not supposed to cut towards me, but since the iron's in the way, and I am a professional,
Trained professional, right?
professional, I'm going to cut that 5.5-inch rectangle. Now, Alex, it's supper time. It's time for us to make some sandwiches. We're going to take 2 of our 3-inch squares.
Okay.
We're going to take our 5.5-inch, fold it in half, and we're going to put the fold at the top. In other words, it's facing away from me, but I align the raw edges near me.
Alrighty.
Okay? So as you can see, the fold does not make it
Yeah, it's
all
shorter.
the way. It's
What about
shorter.
a quarter of an inch or even
And
less?
that's what
maybe?
I'm looking for.
Oh, okay,
Quarter
right.
inch is basically what I'm looking for. I fold that in half. This is my first piece was right side up. My folded piece is folded wrong sides together, by the way.
Good stuff on the outside.
Absolutely. And now I'm making the sandwich by closing it up with the wrong side on top so the right side is facing down. And we're just going to sew a 1/4 inch seam along the right. And I should say you're going to
That's
do that
right.
for
You told me to get busy, and this is the one time you do care about a 1/4 inch.
I do. I sure do, because I want these blocks to finish.
You actually commented
Accurately.
on mine, which I thought was rather strange.
You're doing a very good job.
Thank you, Mr. Timms.
So the nice thing is that you can make your little sandwiches and you have them all stacked up. Make sure that you get them oriented in the right direction.
Yeah, you were real clear about that. Make sure that the
The
fold.
fold is at the top and it's
Right.
tucked in a 1/4 inch, and you just whiz those right through. Now, of course, you want to make sure you've got plenty of bobbin thread when you're doing this, because you could do about 150 of those and they'll all end up on the floor in a jumble with no stitching
Ricky,
at all.
that's a freak of nature. That,
Okay.
you've been chain piecing for about what, half hour, and you have to
And
thread.
you look down, that's right. All right, so we've got these now, and what I want to do is I want to slice them into little bits so that they're all separated. And I'm going to take one of them now and just show you how this opens up and presses. All right, we're going to open it up. I've got the fold away from me again. I like to just open this up and just press it first to get the top part of the bread of the sandwich off to
Okay.
the side. And then take your Flying Geese, the little segment that's going to be that, and you'll just open it up.
Love that.
Hey. All right.
It's the booty
Make sure that
catcher.
comes right to the corner. Give that a little bit of a press. Come up there. And not only do you have a 1-seam Flying Geese block, but look, you've got little pockets to put
Dimensional Flying Geese.
dimensional Flying Geese. So I have to thank my wonderful English friends for teaching me that.
Well, thank you for
I-
teaching us that, because I couldn't believe it on the phone. I couldn't believe
It's
it.
great, isn't it? And then you can make these by the hundreds if you want to, and then you can just play with them and stack them however you like. I have stacked them up. I've staggered them. Can you see that I've staggered them there? And you could, if you like, you could make them more typical, where they're all in rows.
Sure,
So
you could do tons of things.
Lots of things that you can do with this very simple block. Now look at the quilt that I made. This is called Flying Colors. And you can see that I've actually used some little 1/2-inch sashing strips between the geese and also on between the rows as I sewed them together.
Now, you are not going to give everybody the instructions on the quilt, but on the piecing part, because you're all about creativity.
I'm all about creativity. So if you look at the picture and you want to duplicate mine, that's fine. But I think you should take these Flying Geese blocks and just play with them, have fun, make your own quilt, however small, however big that you want to make it. And of course, now look at the full-size image.
Right.
The full-size quilt shows you how this one's laid out, and that I've put some nice little borders on it with some very fine little details around that. And that was a fun quilt for me to make, and it did not take long at all.
I know. You proved it. You proved it, buddy.
All right. So, did you like that? Yeah. Good. All right.
that's the simplest way to make flying geese, but they are three-dimensional, so they're a little bit different. And I'll show you how I made them. So you notice he cut 3-inch squares, not 3.5. So what's the finished size of his square going to be?
2.5.
2.5. So because 2.5 times 2 is 5, plus the 1/2-inch seam allowance means that he gets a 3 by 5.5-inch rectangle for the goose. All right, are we following?
Yes.
Okay, so 2.5 by 5 is going to be the finished size of this because it's twice as wide as it is high. So I made a couple using those directions. I have a goose piece that's yellow and 2 pieces of sky that I'm going to add to it. And this would be piecing it very similarly to the way that we did before, just so that we follow and understand what's the right side and what's the wrong side. So we're putting the right sides together. And what I'm going to do is fold that right sides together. So the right side is underneath, the right side is up here, and the right side is down here. Okay. And we're going to make that sandwich you talked about. And we're going to sew it so that we start sewing from this top and down, from the fold side and down. Okay. And then we open it up. And this fold is going to come right down on top of this seam. Right? And you'll press them together and they look like that.
Cool. That's beautiful.
And again,
Is that blue material one of his materials?
No, this is actually from the kaleidoscope.
Back and whack.
Yeah, it's from the backing of the kaleidoscope quilt. It was
I just
left over.
love
This
those.
is part of what I trimmed off after it came back from the quilter. I had strips that I cleaned off the side, so they were just about right. There are many, many ways to sew a goose. There's at least a dozen different methodologies out there. You can make 4 at a time in a variety of ways. So if you're interested in this, you might want to look at some of these. I'm not going to play them for you today, but there's a lot of them. But I wanted to show you how to trim or resize a flying goose because it's not as hard as it's made out to be. And there are different rulers that you can get, but you don't absolutely have to have a ruler. I'll show you how to do it without a ruler. And the first thing you do is you put it down on your green board. Some of the basic tools in quilting are you need a green board and you need a rotary cutter and you need a good ruler. And if you have those 3 things, you can do almost everything with quilting. So the first thing I do is to verify the seam allowance at the point. So I want to make sure that beyond this point, I have a 1/4 inch for my seam. And I checked it, it's pretty much right. I just trimmed this teeny little bit of thread there. But now I know I have that edge perfect. And the way I did that was to make sure that it's sitting on one of these nice lines. So I know that it's sitting straight and that I'm using my ruler straight. I'm measuring from this point. This one's a 1/4 inch, but I made sure that it's straight up and down. And we've got a 1/4 inch right there. Okay, so what size is it now? If I lay it on my board, and you see I started at 20 and it's going to 26.5. So it's 6.5 inches wide and 1, 2, 3.5 tall. So that's
3 by
again,
6.
No, it's a 6.5.
6.5 by 3.5 is the way I made this one. Okay, so
Oh, it is. Okay, I see it.
Let's say I want to cut it down. So let's pretend I want to cut it down. I've already checked this edge. This edge I know is good. So if I turn it upside down and measure from this good edge, the one I've already established, I want to go up to 3 and trim it to 3, I can make sure that I have that width correct. Okay. So measure from your good edge up, and you can trim it off. So now we need to adjust the width. This is the tricky part. What I've done is, first of all, to put it on the dark lines on every 5 inches, they make a dark line. So this helps you center things. I can see that line more easily through my ruler. So I've got it centered on those 2 lines. So here's the center of my piece at that point. And now I want to measure 2 3/4 inches. And here's how I did the math. So if it's a 3-inch cut, that's 2.5 finished. The width is going to be 2.5 times 2 is 5, plus 1/2 is 5.5, which is the one that Ricky made on the video. And 1/2 of that will be 2.5, plus 1/2 of that seam allowance, 1/4 of an inch. So we get 2 3/4 on each side, plus 2 3/4 is going to be the 5.5. Okay. So here I'm measuring from this bright line 2 3/4 inches, and that's where I'm going to cut. And then I turn it upside down and I do the same thing. So I've got it on my dark lines, and I'm measuring 2 3/4 inches and cut. Now, so here's some of the rulers. If you know what size you're aiming for, probably the easiest ruler to use is Eleanor Burns's ruler. And so if you're going to make some of the 4 at a time kind, then you would sit this on top of your goose and just cut right around it. So it makes it easy in that respect. But
Oh, I've got a bunch of those in my kit. Yeah, my drafting tools. Yeah.
so anyway,
Things like this here. You
But
mean
there's-
like this here, right here?
there's one more video I wanted to show you, and this is the Accuquilt that Fran was talking about the other day that she has, that
Templates.
that does the cutting for you.
Oh, there's that graphite I was looking for. Never mind, sorry.
Hi, I'm Lynn. Hi.
Just 1 second while I organize myself here.
Mm.
Share the screen, and it's here. Okay, so with the Accuquilt machine, it'll do the cutting for you.
Hi, I'm Lynn.
Hi, I'm Leslie.
And today we want to show you, this is the new Go Flying Geese die that finishes to 3 inches by 6 inches.
I'm so excited. I love Flying Geese. I use the block all the time.
This is actually one of our most requested dies.
I
And
believe it.
so we love it so much too that it's actually the die that's included with the Go Big electric fabric cutter. So
Even better, it's included.
that's
like that.
right. That's right. And the wonderful table runner that we have here in front of us, this is the pattern that's included in the packaging with the Flying Geese die. It's called the Flying Windmill Table Runner. And so the great thing, love about this is that except for the sashing and the binding, all of the shapes are cut with this die.
And what I really like about the project are a couple things. One, you have 2 different borders, really. So you got other border ideas there. And are there really Flying Geese units in here?
Yes.
Yes, isn't that amazing?
Yes, it's the quarter squares and the half square triangles.
So just use in a different context what you can make.
Absolutely. So it's not only can you make Flying Geese with this die, but you can make all different sorts of shapes. You can use just the quarter squares or just the half squares. You can mix and match them with our 12-inch sets or our 6-inch sets.
And that's what makes quilting so fun.
Exactly.
You can just start playing.
And we haven't even talked about if you change the fabric,
Right.
which is Moda, was provided by Moda, by the way. But if you change the fabric, you'd get a completely different look and feel. Okay, so let's show how to cut with this die
Sounds
on the big electric fabric cutter. I wanted to mention this is a 6 by 12-inch die board. So not only is it compatible with the Go Big, but it's also compatible with the Go and the Go Baby. And with all geometric shapes, you definitely want to make sure that you're cutting on the lengthwise grain. So if you have the selvage edge on your piece of fabric, you want to make sure that's the selvage edge is facing you, so, or your belly button, however you want to remember that, so that will ensure that the lengthwise grain or the strongest part of the fabric is running the length of the cutter as it goes under the roller. And you can absolutely fan fold this fabric as you're cutting up to 6 layers, or you can layer your fabric. And if you're fan folding and cutting width of fabric strips, just leave a 1/2 inch from the width of the shape to make sure that you are completely covering your shape. And we're just gonna cover the half square triangles with a different color, and I wanna make sure with my 2-tone foam that I've got everything covered. And I'm gonna place my mat on top next. And then we want to make sure with the electric fabric cutter that we turn it on.
That's the hard part.
That's the hard part. And then because the die is a 6 by 12 inch die, I could actually run a second 6 by 12 inch die through at the same time. And I can also, because the machine is doing all the work, I could be over here prepping another die as I'm waiting.
Now, Lynn, you like to call some of these pieces, you call this one a goose?
Yes.
And sky.
Sky.
And I usually refer to these as wings. Either one do the same
Yes.
concept, but it's fun how different names get going to pieces.
Well, it's fun to learn some of the history with these different blocks, you know, as you're quilting, because some of them are very old.
Yes.
And you know, it's wonderful to learn how they came to be.
So the cool thing about the die is that they came all out and they are already all notched. So traditionally when sewing a Flying Geese unit, we would take a square and put it here and sew a quarter or so down from point to point, and then you'd flip it up and then have to trim off all of this extra fabric, which would be waste. So the die is actually saving us fabric too.
Wonderful.
Isn't that cool?
And I love the fact that this is a great die for, I can go into my stash and use a lot of fabric there too.
Oh,
and,
definitely.
And feel like I'm, you know, I can create something new with something that I already have.
Definitely. And so here I'm going to just take my goose and a wing and line her right up. Dog ears are already cut off, so it's all ready to go. And just go into my machine. Now, because I don't have that extra fabric there with the dog ears, I want to make sure I get all the way up to the needle of my machine so that my machine can move it through. And that's all you have to remember. And then you just sew right down. The 1/4 inch seam is already accounted for in the shape. So isn't it great to not have to do math either?
And it's nice that you can, these are great shapes to, you could chain piece and really get going into an
Definitely.
assembly line if you wanted to.
So I'm just going to press that out, and then we'll take our other one and half square triangle and sew it right on there. Again, make sure I get all the way up to the needle. There we go.
So this die is definitely great for beginners or for all skill levels. It's a must-have for your die library.
Especially with it being notched, it's going to give you the accuracy.
Yeah, and the 12-inch size is just a great size to mix and match with other dies that are in your library.
Right. One thing I do want to point out is that this is a perfect goose ready to go. A lot of times when people are first making them, they think the point here should go all the way to the edge. And reality is that's my 1/4 inch seam for when I sew this strip together with my next shape or goose, so that I get that perfect point at the top, so we don't have to bite out of our goose.
And that's a great tip to keep in mind when, if you're just starting to sew these for the first time.
Cool. So what fascinates me about the table runner here is this center block where we did some different layouts with this shape. So you want to talk about what we have here?
Yes, so these are pieces that are cut with the Flying Geese die, and so these are the 1/4 square triangles, and then these are just the half square triangles that make the windmill block. And so it's just wonderful that it's not just Flying Geese, there's so many other combinations that you can do with this die.
And that's really the fun of quilting, is when you start playing and the arrangement of how things go together, all the different designs and blocks you can make.
That's right. Did we talk about the pattern book that comes with the...
We should definitely talk about that.
Okay, so this is the pattern book that comes with the Go Big fabric cutter, and in the back of the book, there are even more ideas about what you can do if you mix and match with just a few other Go dyes, that you can get all these wonderful blocks.
And most of these have all Flying Geese units in them.
That's right.
So tell me what you're thinking.
Would the Ricky Tim's the one seam? And because he ends up, with the pockets, you just leave the pockets as is?
Yeah, they're called three-dimensional flying geese, and you can quilt right over it, or whatever you want to do as far as that goes. So yeah, if you use that method, you do leave them as is.
It just reminds me of when we were doing the trees and houses, I had such a hard time with the sky. Now I know the solution. Now I know how to do it.
Yeah, but one of the nice things about the old-fashioned method is that you don't have that bias edge. You're sewing through a solid piece of fabric, and so it's not going to torque as much. Once you've cut it, then you have that diagonal edge to deal with, and it can distort. So either way, I mean, as I say, there are at least a dozen different ways to do these things. If you want to read some of those videos and explore, see what feels comfortable to you, what works for your fabric. I noticed, for example, on the Accuquilt thing, it said, oh, and it saves you fabric. But did you notice when she took it out of the machine, she threw away those pieces of fabric that were around it? So she threw away the same amount of fabric that you would have thrown. It doesn't really save you fabric. It does save you a lot of time. So it's a trade-off, but it's a couple of $100 for the machine. I have one, Fran has one. If you need some stuff cut, we can talk about it. Do you know the name Eleanor Burns? Eleanor Burns has done a lot of quilting books, and her shtick is quilt in a day. She has different things that you can make in a day. I warn you, she doesn't mean the whole quilt from beginning to end. She does mean the top, and just doing a top in a day is pretty amazing. But she has a lot of economical and quick ideas for how to help you. And with her method for making flying geese, you make 4 at a time, and they come out kind of rough, and then you have to cut them to size. So that's why she advocates using her ruler to work with that. Whenever I have made flying geese, I always wind up having to trim them to size if I really want a particular size to go in my quilt. I think in the old days, if they were a little irregular, it was not a major deal because you could deal with that as you were sewing them together by hand. And it doesn't really matter what size they are as long as they're consistent in size, depending on what you're trying to do. But anyway, just make peace with the fact that you'll probably have to trim your geese because if you get that sewing line just a little bit off, it gets amplified when you fold it over and iron it. It's either too short or too long or something like that. So I've always had to trim my geese, and it's just the way the game is played. Well, accurate cutting, accurate sewing, and none of this is perfect. sort of the way it is. But so the die cutting it has that advantage. It is more accurate cutting. And so the only dependency then is on your faithful 1/4 inch seam. But that is a dependency. So.
Could you use that foot that has that little edge on it?
Yeah.
So you could, to make more
definitely.
sure about that.
Exactly. So if you use your quilting foot with a little fence on it, then yeah, you're more likely to come out with a good 1/4 inch seam. But you also have to remember that you have to match those edges. The two pieces, put the edges exactly together, and then keep them together and against the fence. And yes, you'll get a good 1/4 inch seam. I'll pin it to hold them together and then sew it and then press it. Yes. I keep my ironing board up all the time. It's right at the other end of my sewing machine room, and I have to walk over to it. So that gets me up out of my chair and go exercise. So it's actually a good thing. Janet, have you done much with Flying Geese?
I think I kind of picked up a quilt at a yard sale that had flying geese, and I wasn't really being that conscious of it, but I do like it. So whatever it was, it was. But I'm really interested in using like the rulers. Like I didn't know Eleanor Burns had one. I seen one on a couple Bonnie Hunter's one website. I think she kind of cloned a ruler from somebody else. And she starts with strips and then just cuts the thing with the wings or the sky back and forth. So I kind of like to go that way.
Okay.
Have you used the?
I don't know the Bonnie Hunter one. I was just going to look for it on the web and see if I can find it.
Here today to show you how I use the companion angle ruler and the easy angle ruler together.
Well,
to make
I'm not
really
sure why it's so
easy
soft, but
Flying Geese units.
I
I
can
use
help
Flying
you.
Geese a
He's
lot.
going to show us
I gotta
how
go
to
turn on
use
my
her
heat.
ruler.
Quilt, and I was never happy with the other methods to make Flying Geese. Either I was cutting way big, sewing,
Ooh,
having to sliver
hard.
everything
Oh, that's
down.
right.
So
I
yeah,
was having to cut
You don't have to
various
listen to it.
sizes that I don't keep in my scrap user system four at a time.
Asthma's acting up.
My scraps cut in specific measurements. I use 1.5 inch strips, 2-inch strips, 2.5 inch strips, and 3.5 inch strips in most of my scrap quilting. I needed a method that used the strips that I already have on hand. And I can do that with the companion angle ruler and the easy angle ruler. Let's start with the companion angle ruler because it's going to be the big triangle at the bottom of our Flying Goose unit here. These are quarter
so
square
she's
triangles,
using
so
a
we
lot of
want the
scraps
straight of
and
grain
strips that
to
she already
be
has
on the
on hand.
bottom edge of the triangle on the long side, the hypotenuse. So what we're going to do here is take some 2-inch strips. These are 2-inch strips because these will work with the unit that we've got in our mystery quilt that's running. This is for the Easy
So
Street
she's
Mystery.
using a
These Flying
2-inch
Geese
strip that she
units
has on
need to
hand.
measure 2-inch by 3.5 inches before they are sewn in the quilt. So that's why we are starting with our 2-inch high strips. I've got 4 strips here layered together. They're
So
all
let me just, if she's using a 2-inch strip, she's going to cut her rectangles from the 2-inch strip. Then what's the finished height of her goose going to be?
1.5.
1.5 times 2 is 3, plus 1/2 inch is 3.5. So what she needs for the rectangle is her 2-inch strips by 3.5 inches wide. That's what she's
all
doing.
right side up.
Oh, way too small.
That's my variety.
I did not follow that.
Quickly by laying several strips together. 4 layers is the most I want to cut through. I'm going to use the 2-inch line on the ruler and put that 2-inch line at the bottom of my strip set. I've got the blunt end of
Okay,
the
so she's
companion
using
angle
her
ruler
ruler,
at the top of the strip set.
the 2-inch,
And I'm going to reach over here
2-inch
and I'm going to
depth,
just trim this first cut off.
cutting that
If I
off.
were using a quilt that used half square triangles in this size, I would also trim these off with the easy angle ruler because I can save those for another project. This is very simple.
And because she's working with 45-degree
I'm gonna
angles,
cut, move my strip set, and then we're going to pivot the ruler. I
And
want you
she's
to
gonna
think of a
turn the
washing
ruler
machine,
upside
like an old-fashioned
down.
washing machine
and use
that
that
agitated just like
45-degree
this is the
angle
motion.
in a
So I'm
different
gonna pick
way.
up the ruler, and now the 2-inch line is going to go at the top of the strip set.
Oh,
Make another cut, just like that. Move your strip set, bring the ruler back around. Now put the 2-inch line at the bottom of the strip set and cut. Sometimes after 4 or 5 cuts, I find that I might be getting a little bit off kilter, at which case I will start a clean cut and trim off anything that seems to be out of whack.
Right, so she's
these are the
matching the
Flying
45-degree
Geese,
angle, but she's
big
also double
triangles right
checking
here.
at the baseline to make
look
sure the
just like
baseline is
this.
straight.
These came directly from my scrap drawers. Here's all of my purple scraps in 2 inches just waiting to be sewn into a quilt. So now that we've got our geese cut, here's some other 2-inch strips that I have put together. I've got 4 strips here, and I've
These are
layered
going to be
them
her sky strips.
in
and
matched
she has 4
pairs,
strips that
right
she's put
sides
together.
together. So I have 2 strips here, right sides together, 2 strips here, right sides together. We want them right sides together
I
because
love this woman's brain.
So, and she's putting right sides
so that they
together
will
because she's
nest
going to need
with the
to
blunt
have
tip of
2 that are
companion
exact
angle ruler.
opposite of each other,
So I'm
not
gonna take
2 that are
my-
the very same, but 2 that are
And this
opposite.
is the easy angle ruler.
So by
because
putting
we
the
are
right side,
using
putting the
a
right
2-inch
sides together,
strip,
you have
I'm gonna be
one
using the
that's
2-inch
straight up
line on
and
the
one
ruler.
that's upside
You'll notice
down.
if you look here at the
And when
bottom
you
of the
open them
ruler,
up,
this is a
they're mirror
very well-worn
images of
ruler.
each
I
other.
use this a lot.
Okay.
The 2-inch line comes up and it goes over. Where it goes over, that's your missing dog ear. And that's why we can get by with a 2-inch cut instead of a 2 3/8 inch cut. We've just removed the dog ear first, which actually saves us fabric in the long run. So that's a good thing too. I'm just going to give myself a clean cut on the end of this strip set by putting any line
So
at the
she's
top
going
of
to
the
start
strip
by
set
cleaning up the end
and
of it,
trimming
to make
off
sure
to remove
everything
any
is even.
selvage, any uneven ends.
And then she uses her
And I'm going to bring
ruler.
this back around. Now I might have some left-handers in this group watching this video. So if you are a left-hander,
If you're
I'm going
left-handed,
to-
you do
this
the
is where the
opposite.
right-handers would start. The lefties would just turn the ruler upside down and cut from the right end of the strip. So that's the only difference there. Left-handers would start from this end. Right-handers will start from this end. Here's my 2-inch line right at the edge of the strip set, and I'm going to cut. Just like this. That's cut
That's
1.
good.
If you can read easy angle right side up to your nose, you know you're in the right position. For the second cut, I want you to imagine that there are 2 hinges right here on the long hypotenuse of the easy angle ruler. You're not going to remove the ruler from the table. Do not even lift it up. All you're going to do
So she's
is let
saying,
it roll
imagine
on
that
those
there's a
hinges.
hinge on that hypotenuse
Bring
of
the
the
2-inch
ruler.
line down to the top
And
of
now
your
she's
strip
going
set.
to flip it
The
upside
black
down.
triangle will hang off the bottom end, and you're going to cut. Just like
Oh,
this.
very clever. Okay.
Now, if I were making regular half square triangles, instead of having 2 white strips right sides together, I would have my dark strip and my light strip right sides together so that I could cut already matched pairs ready to go through the machine. But we are cutting these as wing triangles that are going to go right here on either side of our geese. Let's do that one more time. I'm going to roll back to 1 and move my ruler over. What you want to avoid is counting from 1 to
Yeah, I
2
see what
to
you
3
mean,
to
Janet.
4.
This
We're
is
only
a
going to
nice
count
one.
to 2 in this cutting process.
Yeah.
So I started to tell you, Eleanor Burns is quite a long time quilter and very good quilt teacher. And as she ages, she's had problems with her hands and had almost given up quilting because she couldn't cut things anymore. So she's teamed up with Accuquilt to help people who are aging to continue to be able to cut out a whole quilt and still, not have pain in their hands. So I have the kind that you crank, and Fran has the electric one, which is more expensive, but you don't have to crank it.
How is Fran finished working on her quilt?
I haven't spoken to her today about it. I talked to her yesterday, but we didn't talk about that quilt. So I'm sure she's still working on it.
Is she gonna send it out to be quilted or give it a try by
I think she's
herself?
not quite done with the top yet, and I'm not sure she's going to send it out. Probably so, because it's a king size quilt is a lot to deal with on a home machine.
Yeah.
Right. I hope everybody has a great week, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.